Perhaps you've heard stories from Kosovo's past of bloody bedsheets being displayed for the neighbors to see. No, we aren't talking about blood feuds, but rather another outdated cultural relic, the obsession with women's virginity. The bloody bedsheets announce to the world that a newlywed bride has bled on her wedding night, supposedly prove that she was a virgin. Though this practice has gone out of fashion these days, you still hear things like, maintaining your virginity is the greatest way to demonstrate your womanly honor. Or, a woman should deprive herself of all sexual desires until she gets married. Or, if a woman has sex with a man, she might hear, "You're all his now." Open discussion of ideas about virginity is still seen as shameful in many places. That is, unless the point is to shame girls and young women. In Kosovo, the obsession with female virginity goes way back, the concept usually standing as a symbol of a woman's purity. Though the socially conservative focus on women's virginity is not exclusive to Kosovo or to Albanians, the Kanun, a collection of Albanian customary laws dating back to at least the 15th century, has a law that specifically demands virginity of brides. If the husband or his family determines the bride has had premarital sex, she could be summarily abandoned, causing humiliation to her and her family, and likely leaving her unmarriable, nearly a type of social death in past centuries. Social practices and public opinion have become less restrictive over time. But there is still a long way to go. A study conducted in 2018 found that 60% of young Kosovars think that remaining a virgin until marriage is an important virtue, while 25% believe it is only a virtue for girls and women. Many who are focused on virginity and purity point to religion as justification. Both Christianity and Islam prohibit sex outside of the marriage. The Bible treats premarital sex as immoral and the equivalent of adultery. In Islam too, premarital sex is considered zina, a forbidden sin for which the punishment is eternity in hell. But what even is virginity, really? In common parlance, a virgin is someone who has never engaged in penetrative sex. It is a word with a simple, neutral meaning that just describes a level of sexual experience. The problem is when society links a person's worth to their sexual experience. Women and girls are often castigated for ruining their purity, while paradoxically, men are expected to be sexually experienced. The concept's most common usage is also heteronormative, assuming heterosexual pairing between men and women, which leaves many queer people out of the picture. But vaginal penetration isn't the only form of sex. And there are other problems and misconceptions even when it comes to heterosexual sex and virginity. For example, the common belief that women always bleed after losing their virginity is false. Some research has indicated that less than half of women bleed during their first time. This is because every hymen, the thin layer of the skin that partially covers the entrance to the vagina, is different. They can be more or less elastic, or may have stretched or broken from doing normal activities such as riding a bike or sports. This is the reason why virginity testing, a highly invasive pseudo-medical test that checks if a woman's hymen is intact, is nonsense. Placing a high value on virginity can also compound the harm survivors of sexual abuse undergo, adding additional social weight to an already traumatizing experience. But it is important for survivors to know that people can reclaim their own bodies and encounter their sexuality on their own terms. Women's rights activists have drawn attention recently to places like Indonesia, which until recently required women working in the police and the military to undergo virginity tests. The same pseudo-scientific process was a requirement for the brides of military officers. While much of Western Europe has comprehensive sex education in schools and a more progressive view towards female sexuality, even Germany until 1998 had a law that made women eligible for compensation if their husband left them and the woman was no longer a virgin. The understanding was that a woman who wasn't a virgin would have a harder time getting remarried. Though different cultures view virginity in different ways, one commonality is that the concept is generally used to police women's bodies and sexuality. At the end of the day, it's a social construct, one that has been used to instill fear and pain in people, especially women. So if the concept of virginity is socially constructed, that means we can deconstruct it too. It may be many years before virginity can fully shed the taboos and shame that have attached themselves to the concept, but virginity doesn't and shouldn't define a person's worth.